Hello, everyone. Welcome to 180 Degrees of Impact. My name is Matt Scott, and today I have a very special edition of 180 Degrees of Impact. And for those, first and foremost, who don't know what 180 Degrees of Impact is, uh, it's a project that I started to learn from and celebrate people who are making an impact. And the name comes from this idea of hopefully pushing this shift from people on one hand looking to leaders and elected officials to see how they'll make a difference and change the world for the better, to the shift of realizing that we can be the change we want to see in the world. And I started 180 Degrees of Impact as a blog, actually, before beginning to do 180 Degrees of Impact as interviews. And the reason I started interviews really began when my dad passed away. My dad, Moses Scott, passed away on March 8th, 2017, which is a year ago this week. And so, um, you know, I began doing interviews and having conversations with people and showcasing their stories in their own voices because I realized, looking at my dad's story, for instance, and even looking at my own life, how complex people are and how much pressure it is to sum up someone's life and their impact on paper or in in your own words. It's difficult enough for someone to do that for themselves, but it's tough for me to do that about other people. And so I started to interview people, and along the way, it's been really exciting. I've officially featured my 50th person, and pretty recently, over the last couple of months, it occurred to me that I actually had a recording I completely forgot about of my dad. Um, and it was recording from 2015 of essentially an interview I did with him about his his life. And we didn't talk through everything. We talked through really what I would consider to be the first chapter, and I was able to transcribe it because I was always pushing him, and so many people were always pushing him to write a book. In fact, the last Christmas gifts I got for him were like books about writing books. So, uh, that was something that I kept pushing for, and now, with him having passed away, sure, there are so many ways that his story has been captured, but he was never able to write the book. And I'm just thankful that I have this 40-minute audio recording of my conversation with him. And the crazy thing about it is I actually haven't listened to it since transcribing it maybe a week after that. So this was around October 2015. And so, for 180 Degrees of Impact, I really consider this to be his interview and his feature in a lot of the same ways that I have conversations with people, making an impact and showcase their stories in their own words. I want to showcase my dad's story in his words. And to be honest, I don't remember exactly what's on this interview, but I am excited to sit and listen with you and hope you'll join me to do that. Um, Before I get started, I just want to say that, uh, I think a lot of you could imagine, if you have experienced loss, you could relate. If you haven't, you could probably imagine a lot of what it's like to lose someone who you're so close with. And for me, that was my dad. But for you, that might be someone else. And one thing that I'm so proud of with 180 Degrees of Impact and the interviews I've done is the fact that there's this idea of post-traumatic growth. Like in Option B, Sheryl Sandberg's book, she talks about this idea of post-traumatic growth, like this ability to bounce forward after trauma or after an event like a major loss. And I feel like what I've created out of 180 Degrees of Impact is that for me. Like, I've tried to start so many projects and in the past, and it just never really caught on. But for me, there's that added sense of purpose, knowing that, especially when I first started it, when I was doing the blog posts, the first 5 or so I wrote while in my dad's office, while home around the holidays, and it was amazing to have his buy-in and see him really passionate about what I was accomplishing, and always proud of me and unconditionally loving me regardless of the things that I created or accomplished. And yet I'm still driven to accomplish what I can because I know my dad would be so proud. And so I just want to point out that for those who are really suffering or struggling with grief, that maybe you don't see it now. Maybe it has been longer than a year for you. Maybe it's been a decade. Maybe it's been decades. Maybe it's been a day. Maybe it's been a week. I want you to know that it can get better and that beautiful things can come out of this. It's not all bad. And I think that's hard to see sometimes, but it's not. And I hope that my example could help show that. The second thing I want to say is that I am really inspired to do this and to record this and share this, I think in part as a millennial, just being comfortable and raised with technology and sharing a part of myself and being vulnerable in this way. But really, I want to shout out a few people who really inspired me to do this. So one, there's a great podcast called Terrible, Thanks for Asking. Nora McInerney is the host, and a lot of people go on that to share their stories and their grief and their negative experiences. And, I just wanted to shout that out because that really inspired me to want to share this in a very real way. And also want to shout out a number of people who I've featured in 180 Degrees of Impact, and some who've been incredibly supportive to me in losing my dad. So first and foremost, Elsa Z is the founder of an organization called Agora, and she actually inspired me to start 180 Degrees of Impact. And I don't think she totally knows that yet, but Elsa lost her dad to cancer. And I met Elsa it was October 2016 at an event at Harvard. And Elsa reminded me and gave me a great piece of advice that the urgency of life is today. And so I really hold on to that. And she's the reason I started 180 Degrees of Impact when I did. And I think one of the reasons why I've continued to do the work that I'm doing. Another person I want to shout out, similar to Elsa, who I also want to interview formally for 180 Degrees of Impact, but featured in the written portion, was Billy Ward, who I know from more than a decade ago at this point, which is kind of crazy, who was my advisor at Seton Hall Prep, my high school. And he actually offered to sit down and talk with me after my dad passed away, and was so inspirational and supportive, and just one of the examples of so much of the love that I've gotten from people, and of the love that I'm so thankful to have received. And then finally, in the same vein, a good friend of my dad, Steve Reineman, who I featured in the first interview of 2018. And Steve was the first person I thought to have speak at the memorial service. And he actually flew out from Denver to speak about my dad, and has been incredibly supportive of my family, including my sister who took over my dad's business right at home, of Essex County, and of me ever since. So I'm very thankful for him. And it turns out he also just lost his mom about a couple months before I lost my dad. Similarly, I just want to shout out the other people I've interviewed for 180 Degrees of Impact who have mentioned their loss as part of their story, and who have carried on and who have made an impact and done beautiful things. But the two who immediately come to mind are Nisha Katecha and Jade Liam Traskell. Jade being a video game composer making representative music for East Asian artists, and Nisha Katecha, who's the creator of something called Good News Shared. And so without further ado, that was enough shout outs, but I hope that you'll stay tuned and join me in listening to this for the first time. I'm probably going to end up crying, but again, thanks for your support and for being part of this. And again, enjoy.
I just want to start with you. Are you awake? Are you awake?
Yes.
Okay, just I don't know if you were a second ago, but this is kind of funny. I want to start by you. I guess I want you to start where you want to start, like with talking about your story.
Yeah, my story. What I'm thinking about now.
What do you mean now? Like in this moment?
In
or?
this moment.
Yeah.
In this moment, what I'm thinking about relative to the situation in Prince Edward County, Virginia, is that the way I see my life is taking lemons and making lemonade. And that's what, for me, Prince Edward County was. Now, some people might not know about Prince Edward County. In 1959...
Well, wait, just to stop you for a second.
What?
At what point did you start to see it being a making lemons and turning it into lemonade story kind of thing?
Well...
Like at what? Because now you see it like that, but
now I see it like that. Back then, it was all about competition. The fact that schools were closed in Prince Edward County was someone saying, primarily the white people in power, not all white people, they were saying that we the blacks, weren't as good, weren't as smart, and so it's about competition.
With the white people.
Huh?
With the white people. Competition with white people.
Yes, competition with white people in school, because people in power, the white people, were saying we weren't as smart, we couldn't learn, we just were dumb. And not only with the white people, I hate to go into this now, but light-skinned black people. I had a cousin whose name I will not mention, used to call me little black boy. That didn't make me angry. That made me wanted to do better than her little light-skinned colored kids.
Wow. Yeah.
It's all about competition.
So did you think it was just, like, did you see that, was there competition with other black people?
Well, actually, it was competition, and this is bad for me to say, but it was competition with white people, with light-skinned black people. For example, you remember the gentleman who came here one day. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to mention his name, but his name is Samuel.
What is his name?
Samuel Cobbs.
Okay.
Samuel was very...
And what's the other person? So was he the one you're talking about, his family? Wait, who was the lady who called you black boy?
Oh, that's Aunt Singh.
Okay. Aunt Singh?
Yeah, she was my mother's, we call her Aunt Singh, but she was my mother's first cousin, and she was very light-skinned, very light-skinned. All her kids were light-skinned, and they said, they called me little black boy. And, it didn't make me mad. I just gritted my teeth and said, wait and see. And I studied harder, I studied longer. In fact, I memorized textbooks, so it didn't matter. Just to make sure that I didn't fail.
Yeah.
And with white people, I did that. And when I went to Morristown, and I'm jumping ahead from Prince Edward County.
Well, don't jump ahead. Okay, you can jump ahead now.
Morristown, we talk about Morristown later.
Yeah.
Went to Morristown. I took algebra, honors algebra, and I can see now, all these years later, I can see Charlie Shade with his glasses on, a white cat. And guess what? I competed neck and neck with a boy they thought was a genius. He was white.
This was in
Morristown, New Jersey. Yeah, high school.
So was this junior year of high school or senior year?
No, this was the 10th grade.
10th grade.
Yeah, sophomore year.
Sophomore year.
And so I wasn't going to let Charlie beat me. And it also went to gym class. I know we had competition in gym class. We had a wrestling match one time, and the instructor had to pull me off of the kid. He said, "You don't supposed to be choking him." But it was all competition, But the thing I remembered, and this is Miss Jeter. She was a teacher in Morristown High, red hair, just started teaching, and people from the South couldn't talk. I still can't talk the way I should. But I wrote a paper, And she came up to me and she said, "Moses, you real smart." I said to myself, "I know that." And but the fact that she said that to me meant a lot. And so it's competition. In fact, if it weren't for the what happened, not wanting to integrate because they were better, I might have still been in Prospect. I think I would, because I was happy with Prospect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had everything. At that time, we didn't know we were rich. We didn't have much money, but we had plenty of food, clothes, and friends.
Yeah.
What else is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and that's what that's all about. I don't know how I got off on that tangent.
No, I mean, I understand. Because I'm trying to kind of follow. It did seem, your tangent did seem a little random to me, but I'm trying to follow where you came from. And you were saying that really, the first thing you said was that it's about taking lemons and turning them into lemonade. And so somehow that ties into being competition.
Yeah.
But I guess one question I have before we go back to like where you're starting, one question I have is, I guess that you've seen competition, like you're a competitive person, you've seen that competition throughout your life. And one of my questions though is, at what point, like you mentioned Sam Cobbs,
yes.
You mentioned Aunt Sing.
Yeah.
Now my question is and even with that other student in your class,
Yeah.
My question is, at what point did you say to yourself, like, I've surpassed them, or I've succeeded, or I've proved them wrong? At what point did you say that?
Well, I try to say that every day. It wasn't any point. I mean, if I go to, you have to perform each day. If I'm better prepared than they are, or just as prepared, then I can say, hey, I hope I can change your mind.
But with Aunt Sing, what was that? Like, what was that? Was that your thought too, within their family?
No, look.
Because it doesn't seem like you'd have something to perform against.
No, but this is it.
Yeah.
I think this is really what it was.
Right.
I didn't react to that, but that made me mad. That hurt made me mad. And instead of lashing out at them,
Mm-hmm.
I said, I will do better.
Mm-hmm.
And
that was just growing up, like the whole time you were growing up.
The whole time growing up. And, there was this one light-skinned girl gave me soap. For the kids exchange presents at Christmas. She gave me soap to wiring me, said I was dirty. But that's all right.
But where do you think, so here's my question.
Yeah.
Even if that made you angry,
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think that attitude came from, that because some people would just lash out and show their anger or be violent in response to that. Some people would just be beaten down by it and discouraged, but you were motivated.
Yeah,
where did that come from in your upbringing? How would you explain that?
Well, it's upbringing, because number one, I knew they were wrong, and I wanted to show them they were wrong.
How did you know they were wrong?
Well, because my mother, and she was very strong, and I can tell you things she did that stays with me today. That's why I speak to her every day and talk to her.
Yeah.
My grandmother, Rosetta Allen Brown, we used to make speeches in church, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I used to practice my speeches for her, make sure I was ready for Sunday. And she said, Mose, you can memorize a lot. You're going to be something when you grow up. I mean, that type of talk, positive talk. I mean, I know that helped, and my mother, the things that she have done for me. And in fact, she's responsible for saving my life. I never told you that.
How?
Well, we started out in Virginia, then we went to Asbury Park.
Mm-hmm.
And I was about 3, 4, maybe 5 years old, living in Asbury Park. One night my father came in, drunk, and and he was in World War II. He came in drunk for whatever reason, and for some reason, he started beating me.
Yeah.
He got on top of me, and he had his hands around my neck.
Oh.
And Mama said, Mama, strong lady,
Mm-hmm.
5'10", 200 pounds. She said, Mose, get off that boy. Mose didn't move fast enough. So Mama went to the kitchen.
Uh-oh.
And she got this big knife.
Oh, no.
And she came back, Mose, get up now. Get off that boy. And he got up.
Yeah.
He got up.
I think you've told that story before.
I've told that story because it's always close to me.
Yeah.
And she was like that, not just for that. When schools closed in Prince Edward County, what did she do? She went to Farm Mill to the meeting and learned that the Quakers had found families across the United States to keep kids who had, black kids especially, who didn't have schools.
Uh-huh.
And what did she do? She came home. She explained to me who these people from up north, and they got people you can stay with. And she said, she didn't give me an opinion. She said, Mose, what do you want to do? She didn't tell me what to do. She didn't suggest what to do.
Right.
And I said, Mom, I want to go.
Right. So I guess my question, it's interesting. Again, I think it's interesting. I don't know if you really appreciate all of the, I don't know if you really appreciate this as much as I kind of do, because I think when I think of people, or when you think of people, there are people who just aren't motivated people. There are people who are easily discouraged, who, if people say you can't do it, they'll go with that. Now, do you think that you're saying that your mother really had a lot to do with you finding motivation in or being motivated?
Being motivated, plus everything that happened in that environment caused you to be motivated. For example, Miss Marshall, civil hair, about 80 years old.
Uh-huh.
I used to go up the hill and I clean her house, wax her floors, make a bed. And one day she says to me, I must have been about 9. She said, Mose, if you learn how to make bed good, you're going to be able to get a good job at a hotel. Now, that made me mad, too.
Yeah.
I said, no way. That's why I said it myself.
But how did you know that you wouldn't want to do that?
What?
That might sound dumb, but how would you... Because if you think about it, here's my perspective. Mm-hmm. My perspective is that even around the same time, literally the same exact time as this was going on with you, there were other black people who were being told you could be a bus driver, or you could be a maid, or you could work in a hotel. And there are lots of black people who went on to do that and were very happy with themselves because that's what they aspired to. Now, why do you think it was that you aspired to more? That's my question.
Well, we have number one, I knew that I could do more. But we did have role models. We had our preachers, with our lawyers. We had Uncle Edward Allen, who used to bring us gifts every Christmas. He was our honor taker. We had people who were smart. And so we had role models. It wasn't me just being competitive.
Yeah.
We knew about the Afro-American. I always tell you about black people who were doing well.
Who would tell you that?
They would have articles. This is the newspaper. Afro-American came out of Baltimore. Okay. That's the paper. You should get it and look at it. But it always highlighted people who were doing well. Thurgood Marshall, people like that. Even Martin was in the news back then.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King. So, I mean, we know that black people could perform. And for this lady to tell me that I am going to be making beds the rest of my life to make money, this was insult, but the way I said, yes, ma'am, Miss Marshall, thank you.
Right.
So
so that kind of brings me, I guess that's interesting. Like that, I could see where you get that motivation from. There are a lot of, so what I'm gathering from what you're saying is that you see on the other side of the grass, basically, you see on the other side of the road that there are these good role models, and you see that you want to be there.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is still talking kind of about when you were in middle school or just starting high school before 1959, what did you want to be? Like, what did you see yourself doing with your life?
Yeah, when you're a kid, and well, I came down to
Because I'm sure it was a lot different than what you do now. Of course, a lot different than what you do now and what you ended up doing. But
No.
what did you think? What were you thinking? Because you had role models. You said to yourself, I don't want to be making beds, for instance. But did you have an idea of what you wanted to do?
well, the role models we had was preach. I thought of being a preacher. Because they were well respected in the community. So respect was everything to me. Well respected, educated, and maybe a lawyer, because lawyers were doing a lot then, standing before the Supreme Court, building a case for black people to be free.
Mm-hmm.
So a lawyer, a doctor. We did have a black doctor in Farmville,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Rollins.
Yeah.
People always, he did put a couple of people away. He was getting old then, but that's just, so we had role models. In fact, in my family, there were role models. My grandfather was a small man, Edward Brown, a smart man, and I was his assistant. He took a liking to me, and I took care of his business.
What was his name?
Edward Brown.
Edward Brown.
Ed Brown. Brown. And he had a role in the local clubs, and he was a very strong man, very political man. When he walked the road at night, he always had a gun in his back pocket because Ku Klux Klan was around. Now, on the political side, he worked at a store up in Prospect, which you've probably seen, and he didn't take money, but he'd come home each night with bags full of cans. And over time, very short period of time, he had in the house back, what we call it, the corn house. You thought he had a store back there. We had every type of food that you want, So he was a smart man. So we had smart people. And my mother. When my mom finished, she went about 6th, 7th grade because she had to quit to work. She was smart. My father, I didn't see much of him, but he was very smart. I remember him coming down one day. Well, not 1 year. He used to come home every 5 years driving a black Cadillac. And he was always neatly put together. You see his pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I was impressed with, someone would say, "How are you today?" And he said, "Fine." "And you?" I said, "That's pretty cool." I said, "That's pretty cool." So he was, he was a good guy. I never saw him, never got to know him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
that's interesting. So that's interesting. Okay. I'm sure that you have a lot of stories from your childhood too, but I think I understand that aspect of it. Now, going back to the idea of competition, making lemons out of lemonade, people telling you no, all sorts of stuff. Let's start with the closing of the schools. I would just like you to start off talking about that.
Okay, well, what happened there?
And how it kind of came about.
How it came about.
And even the history would be good, like talking about some of the technical stuff behind it would be nice. So I guess the first place to start would be what you were doing leading up to that, like right before that.
In terms of school?
In terms of school, I guess that's probably the main thing, but life even?
Well, life is, just a typical life in the country. You work hard, very hard. You go to school. Your social outlet was the church.
Yeah.
So that's pretty clean cut. But let's talk about what happened in that period of time. Then we'll go back to things that happened before.
Okay.
It was in August of 1959. We were listening to the radio. Al Smith was the announcer. We didn't have TV or anything like that. He said, the schools in Prince Edward County will not be opening in September this year. And of course, all of the kids, black kids, white kids as well, they were happy. I mean, because we all figured that it'd probably be a 2-month delay. 2 more months, extend summer by 2 months.
Right.
That's good and bad. The only thing, we didn't have to worry about studying,
Right.
but we were very busy working.
What were you doing?
Oh, well, we were working, we would go to Uncle Rollins' house, that's Aunt Alma's husband and her family, and we'd help them, cut tobacco and do jobs like that. We'd go over to Aunt Sing and help her pick berries. And then we'd go somewhere and dig potatoes. So we were working very hard. Plus, we also worked I worked with Mr. Jamie Johnson, who was a white man, very nice white man. And he had odd jobs that he needed me to do. Other people needed me to wax the floor, and I could really wax the floor. You'd see your face in the floor. I reckon I should do that now, but I've done enough of that. And so keep me on track here. Where we
that was the answer I was looking for.
Yeah.
But you were saying, leading up to this, like the announcement, you were saying that you thought that school would be delayed by 2 months.
Yeah,
and
right.
You
Yeah,
had work and church and all that other stuff going on anyway.
Yeah.
So you were saying you weren't too concerned?
I wasn't too concerned because I thought none of the kids were concerned.
You were happy.
We were happy.
Yeah.
I was very happy. You get another 2 months not to study, and just do whatever you want. I mean, and so, but then when it went on beyond that, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then I missed school, because you remember, school was where I competed.
Right.
Schools was where I showed that I was good as anybody,
Right.
And better than most. And so so that outlet was gone. And so when the Quakers came down a year later, then I was ready for that.
When did the Quakers come down exactly?
They came down about May or June.
Yeah.
They came down May or June. And, had a meeting in Farmville. Now, the man who made this possible, well, the NAACP, but the leader there out in Farmville was Reverend Griffin. Reverend Griffin. He was an amazing guy. He was a leader.
Was he black?
He was black. He's a black. He's a preacher. And, he said, this is wrong.
Yeah.
And he traveled over the United States, taking the story there, traveled to Washington, talked to the lawyers. And when we left home, he used to come visit us. He used to go to the various states, New Jersey, Ohio, Michigan, visiting kids who had been placed with families in those cities. Reverend Griffin.
So my question is, I guess I understand how you felt a little bit, but before we even get to the Quakers, could you talk about what, as far as you know, the history of what happened, like why the schools closed, first and foremost?
Well, the schools closed. It goes back down to Barbara Johns. Barbara Johns' sister lives down the street here,
right.
Throwing Stone, right?
What's her name?
Jones.
Joan Johns?
Well, that
was her.
Yeah. Jones, that was a maiden name.
Yeah, maiden name.
Joan Johns. And she married William Cobbs, Samuel's brother. Right?
Yeah, okay.
We see each other on CBS sometimes.
Oh.
Yeah. But it all started back then. What we were concerned about, because our place was, we took class in shacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rooms this big, and had a divider, one class on this side, one class on this side, plus it leaked, Yeah. And so it started out that the kids just wanted, a nicer place, just like the white kids.
Yeah.
So Barbara Johns, who was 16, she was a student leader, and make a long story short, she got all the black kids together, and then they started revolting, nonviolently. They said, we want better schools. They'd go down to the Farmville, to the courthouse, and they'd picket, they would march. And we got some good information on Barbara. But she is one of the people who started this. And in fact, now when she was in high school, what they did, they had a good plan. One of the kids who were part of that group, Barbara John's group, he went down to Farmville.
Right.
I mean, to town, and he called the high school, and he sounded like he was a white man. Well, we got this boy down, called the principal.
Yeah.
We got this boy down here from y'all school. I think you better come down here right now, or we gonna put him in jail. It wasn't really. So the principal, everybody got out and went downtown.
Yeah.
And then Barbara called the assembly. All of the kids came in.
Yeah.
And she explained the plan, what they were going to do. The marching and all that stuff.
Were you there?
No, I wasn't there. I was a little younger.
Yeah.
I was in elementary school.
So how old were you when because she was like 16 at this time?
Yeah, she was 16. I probably was about 6.
Okay.
6 or 7. And then the teachers came back. Some of the teachers came in. A 16-year-old kid, just picture this on the stage. She said, we're going to ask all the teachers to leave. I mean, I got to read it, but it's a good story around that.
Yeah.
We got to ask all the teachers. Then the principal came back. They asked him to leave. I think they should make a movie of that damn.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, they should really make a movie. And all the teachers leave, they got together. And then the NAACP, Reverend Griffin, and the NAACP met with the students. People from Richmond came up. Some of the lawyers Landerville knew, and she could speak to that. And they came up and they convinced the kids, you want more than just better schools. You want to go to the same school they go to.
Right.
All right?
So like not separate but equal.
Yeah, not separate but equal. They said not separate but equal. That's not enough. We want to be equal, same school, everything. So Barbara, actually Jones says that she was one of the plaintiffs down the street. She said that a few months ago when we had, I think it's the theater down here. And so Joan was one of the plaintiffs, I think they call them. And that led to the 1956 decision that separate but equal was illegal.
That was 1956, right?
About 56.
That was
Chief Justice Warren, Earl Warren. Chief Justice Earl Warren.
Well, was that Brown?
Yeah, Brown versus the Board of Ed. Yes, that's right. Brown versus the Board of Ed. So it started with this little girl, but Barbara was also the nephew of one of the most aggressive ministers, and I can't remember his name right now. And she lived with him. So she was trained by a minister.
That's funny.
You see?
Wait, so I guess to backtrack, to talk about what like something that relates a little bit more to your experience directly. Oh, even though it's well documented, what was, in your words, what was wrong with the schools?
Nothing.
Like, what was the problem?
Look,
because
this is
nothing.
Well, look, see, you know why it wasn't that bad for me? Because that's the way we lived. I mean, we had outhouses. We didn't have great houses. I mean, they leaked. We had snakes in the... And so I think it took people like Barbara Johns, who probably lived in better houses, who had a little more middle class while we were in the lower class. I think it took people like her to see what was possible and to say, we're not going to accept this anymore, But for someone who was, I don't think I would, it was all right, So you needed someone like a Barbara Johns, someone who had seen a better life. And in fact, she had lived in cities in Alabama. I can't remember which one. With the pastor, I have to dig that information up again in my mind. But she had seen better. That's why she was the right person to be a leader. Yeah. And she was well trained by one of the top ministers of the time, a gentleman who knew Martin Luther King. All of them came up together. And
Interesting. So I guess so that's what. Okay, this makes some sense to me. So basically, the school's closed, and the way that you looked at it, it wasn't. I guess my question is, so actually I'll let you continue. You're talking about what led up to the school's closing. So you're talking about Barbara Johns. You're talking about you got up to really like Brown versus the Board of Education, separate and equal isn't equal. What happened between then in 1956 and 1959 that led to the school's closing?
Well, yeah. I mean, most of the places in the states abided by the Supreme Court decision, except the state of Virginia. The state of Virginia had something called massive resistance, and you know how they lobbied to keep the schools open, segregated.
People. You're saying that people lobbied to keep them segregated?
Well, the people in power,
right?
Not people. The people, the politicians, and they referred to their efforts as massive resistance. It was Virginia's way of not integrating schools, and I think one way was not to collect tax, which went to support schools. And the black kids in Prince Edward County, of course, went to private schools. And the story surrounding that, while I was out of school, you know what I was doing? I was working with Mr. Johnson, cleaning windows, making the schools, making those buildings nice for them.
Yeah.
I never thought of that, but when I think back to it, I said I should have been mad, but I really wasn't because I was making money. Yeah.
I mean I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But here's my question. At what point did you realize that it wasn't equal or that it wasn't fair? Because after 1956, when they had that decision, or even before that when Barbara Johns was speaking up, at what point did you realize it wasn't fair? Because I do realize you were really, really young at the time, but at what point did you say, what did you realize you weren't being treated fairly?
Well, I think it wasn't treated fairly in the sense that, I mean, the decision had been made that we couldn't go to school with white kids. Mm-hmm. But between you and I, I hate to say this, but, well.
No, go ahead.
In one sense, and then I'll go the other way, the black kids lost a lot when schools were integrated.
Mm-hmm. We had greater
self-esteem.
When they weren't integrated.
When they weren't integrated.
Integrated,
and we probably had more leaders coming out.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I mean, we were powerful people in that regard. In some sense, and I hate to say this, it would have been better if integration had never taken place.
No, I understand.
Don't say anything about that.
No, I think that's a good point. It's a fair point if you frame it properly. If you say, okay, well, you know, we had a lot that we gained, but just because we integrated doesn't mean the problems were fixed. Yeah, in fact, there were other problems that were created by integration.
Yeah, and you have people always trying to, in that environment, people who want to make you still look stupid. Yeah. And that really will, you know, hurt a kid, destroy a kid who didn't have self-confidence, you know, who didn't take it as competition.
Right.
Who thought, really, maybe I'm not so smart. And the fact is they weren't smart, but the fact of the problem was they were teaching from books that were geared to
Yeah.
your experiences.
Well, could you actually? So that was that before or after integration? They were doing that.
Oh, that was before.
Before integration, they were teaching from books that were geared toward your experiences.
Well, they were teaching from books that like it had Wanky and James too.
What does that even mean? Could you explain that? Because I've heard that a lot, like how standardized testing is like unfair because it's geared towards certain people's experiences more than others.
Yeah.
Could you explain how your books were geared toward your experiences before integrating? Because I want to understand what you mean by that.
Well,
like examples.
Well, I'm talking theory.
I don't know who Wenky and James are.
Yeah, Winky and Jane, they were a monkey and a little white girl. They would, and we had to read about that. You're reading about stuff that really wasn't a part of you. You're very seldom. They didn't have a story about Paul Robeson or the other great blacks. We didn't read about that. We read about white people who did well. When you look at TV, what did you see? You see white people doing well, looking good. It was a long time. The only black TV show they had was Amos and Andy. You have to look at Amos and Andy. you need to look at that.
I feel like it's probably really offensive.
Yeah, it really was, making them look stupid.
Yeah, because I've heard of that, a lot of that sort of stuff. Where here's what I'll put out there.
Watch your time now.
No, I know it's about 1:30 now.
Yeah.
But no, what I'll say though is that what I've seen. I know why people make a big deal of the Cosby Show, because really, I don't know. I'm sure you know better than I did. But I would say really it was the one place where black people weren't being discriminated against. The Cosby Show, where you had strong black people. Because even before that, there was like the Jeffersons, where he was like kind of degrading to.
They were.
And so I understand that.
Yeah.
But I want to wrap up this part nicely. So you had all of that before. You were being taught toward your experiences, and then after integration, well, we'll get there.
Well, we were never taught in our experience because the people who created the books were the white people.
So they were creating books for your people.
Yeah, based on white experiences.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what it's about. I mean, if it had been the other way around, look, it could have been the other way around. You'd have black people on the other side. We could have been the top group, and we would treat the white people differently.
But so, at what point did you realize? I guess I asked this before. At what point did you realize that this wasn't really fair, or that this wasn't okay?
I never realized it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because number one, I didn't care what book it was. I memorized whatever it is. So it really didn't matter. It didn't hurt me academically.
Right.
But now that I stand back and listen to people talk, I say, you're right.
Yeah.
I didn't come up with the idea.
Yeah.
I just learned over the years. But one thing I want to leave this competition. Why did I go in the military, go to OCS? It was competition.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going to be, nothing wrong with a person who was a draftee, but I said, I want to be, an officer. Why did I go to Harvard Business School? Because the first man who went to the moon, walked on the moon, Scott Carpenter, one of them, he said, my only intellectual experience was going to the Harvard Business School. I never heard of the Harvard Business School. And I said, oh my God, I got to do this. And this would be another way for me to show them that blacks are as smart as anybody else.
Okay.
I wasn't interested in business.
Okay. So I want to wrap this up nicely.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to wrap it up, probably.
Who's this? Let's see who this is.
Who is it?
Right at home, Moses Scott. May I help you?
Oh my God.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, how you doing? You're good.
It's the guy from the
auto
dealer fixing the car.
No. Yeah, well, that tie, actually, that was a used tie. The what? Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm-hmm. What do you advise? You must have a recommendation.
So, as we kind of wrap up recording, the next thing I really want to focus on, make sure that we covered, is what actually happened in the closing of the schools with that instance. I want to make sure we have all those details leading up to there. I want to start with the Lemons Lemonade competition piece, because I think that's key, and that's really where we start here. And that's our first chapter.
All right. So that was a lot easier to listen to than I thought it would be. And, as you kind of heard at the end, there has been like this one thought in my head that's like I felt bad and guilty that I didn't record more, like even more of his story. And I mean, a lot of the pieces, I will say, are scattered all over the place where my dad talks about his story, or it's in writing in different books, or he would talk about it for his business right at home, which I was actually shocked to hear him answering the phone. And that was something that I would hear all the time. So that was intense. But as I was listening, I wrote down a few notes, actually, just to wrap it up, and a few final thoughts. The first thing that really hit me was that a lot changes, but a lot stays the same. Like, I thought that those questions, if my dad were here and I had the chance to interview him today, I would ask those questions. And they sound a lot like questions I would ask for 180 Degrees of Impact. And so, while so much is different, including the fact that I don't have him, present in the traditional sense in my life, I was a little bit shocked and caught off guard with the types of questions that I was asking, because this was 2.5, almost 3 years ago, I think. And I was proud in that moment. And I mentioned that idea of guilt, but I, more than anything, am so proud that I actually decided to record this. And I'm proud that I listened back to it, but really, I am so thankful for the technology to capture these stories, to capture my dad's story, especially that early story of his life that isn't as well documented or tied in with the history. So yes, I could have recorded more, but the thing is, the pieces that I really captured were things that I forgot. And I don't think things that, lots of details that are hard to find. The other thing that came to mind for me is that, second point is that I'm so lucky, and that my dad was speaking about his experience with his dad, and with my grandfather on his side, who I never knew. And I'm really lucky for all I have. And I think that was one reason my dad was just so happy seeing us and the lives that me and my 3 older siblings, and even my mom, sister, and so many others would live, because he grew up with much, much less. And I think just to see us with all of these things that he had to work for so much, and that he wished he had, and a lot of things that he could ultimately give us because of the work he did and because of what he went through. That was something that was so powerful. This idea of making lemonade out of lemons is also just something that I feel like now with my grief that I hold on to, and it's no wonder that my attitude has been so optimistic, for lack of a better term, when it comes to dealing with adversity, because my dad did that in a massive way. And I'm really thankful that I've been able to inherit that idea of always trying to find a way through, like making a way out of no way, as they say in the exhibit in the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, which actually features the story of Prince Edward County. So I'd recommend checking that out. I have to watch Amos and Andy at some point. I guess I haven't watched that show yet, and my dad told me I should. And finally, there was one thing that stood out to me that I wrote down, which is that my dad said, "Watch my time," and I think it's because probably around like 2:30 or something that day, I was hopping on a bus or a train back to Washington, D.C., where I lived and where I still live, and I think it's important that we all watch our time, that we're all really careful, and that we don't rush as much, and that we take time to make moments. And again, my big recommendation, recording and capturing them, whether it's video, pictures, audio. It's so important that we have a way to share our stories. And I'm really thankful that I could do that now through 180 Degrees of Impact. But I think I'm even more thankful that I had the inclination, for whatever reason, to do that with my dad and his story. And so this was a true 180 Degrees of Impact interview. And as I wrap up all of the interviews, there's so much I could say, but if you want to learn more about 180 Degrees of Impact, visit www.lets.care. On social media, it's at Let's You Care. On social media, I'm at Matt ScottGW. And thank you for watching. If you're still watching, seriously, that it means a lot to me. And as I say at the end of each and every interview I do, until next time, keep impacting. And thanks again.